Thank you for being here today. We're really excited to have you, and we hope that you find today's session very informative and helpful. So we'll just jump right in. Today, the topic is planning for two lifetimes, simple steps to secure a brighter future for your loved one. All right, we'll get into a few housekeeping things. If you could remain muted during the presentation, that would be fantastic. Towards the end, we will have a live question and answer session. You can either use the chat or raise your hand and we'll unmute you. For privacy and security reasons, video has been disabled for this. And the webinar is actually going to be recorded, which is one of the reasons that we take your images down. So yeah, since we're recording it, this presentation will be available on our website, and following today, we will send you a link to view that so you can revisit the presentation or share it with someone that you think might find it beneficial. So a little bit about Monarch and who we are. You can see our mission, vision, and values there. But we really envision a world where all people can achieve their unique potential, whether that's on the intellectual and developmental side of things, which we refer to as IDD, or that's mental illness, traumatic brain injury, behavioral issues, things like that. That's who Monarch supports. We were actually established in 1958, and we became a leading provider in health services in North Carolina. And we're proud to say that we serve more than 27,000 people annually. And then where we are actually, we have 130 locations in 46 different counties in North Carolina. And we recently expanded to Rhode Island, and we're excited for some of the other expansion opportunities that we have coming our way. So today I will introduce you to our speaker, Ryan Platt. He actually founded a special needs plan in 2005 and has been a pioneer in his field. As CEO of the firm, his background includes completing his special care planner certification, as well as advanced training in estate and tax planning, special needs trust, government programs. He also understands the emotional dynamics of working with people and families who have loved ones with special needs, and is passionate about meeting families, learning their concerns, and understanding their values. And he just wants to help people create plans that will help secure the needs of two generations. Also, he's an award-winning author from Autism Parenting Magazine and a regular contributor to Exceptional Needs Magazine. So at this time, I'm just going to roll over to Ryan.
Jen, thanks so much. That was a very kind introduction. So I certainly appreciate that, and very happy to be here with you and Monarch and all the folks on our session today. Looking forward to chatting about planning for two lifetimes, giving you a little bit of an overview of what that really means. And then just like Jen mentioned, we're going to open it up for questions at the end. So hopefully you definitely have some. I'm going to share my screen as well, so you're not just staring at my picture on the screen and just listening to my voice. You have something else to look at, thank goodness, right? As we go forward today. I always put this up here, just a disclosure. It just says we're going to talk about a lot of things today, and what we talk about is not necessarily specific advice, but just general information. So please take it as that as we go forward. I love to have expectations. I love to set expectations at the beginning of every event that I do and every meeting that I have. And this picture, I always share it because at the end of these sessions in the past, and we've been doing these for quite a while, just about all those 20 years since 2005. Parents have come up to me after this session and said, "Wow, Ryan, that's a lot of information. I felt like I was drinking out of a fire hose. And so if you feel that way today, it's okay. We are going to talk about a lot of different pieces. We're going to talk about how to build a plan, what to think about, figuring out how to create this vision going forward for your child's future support. And then also, what are the pieces that you may want to have as you build this structure? What are the pieces of it that will be required? So we're going to talk about all those pieces. So we are going to go fast because we have about 45 minutes before we get to questions. So if you feel this way and at the end and you feel like, holy cow, that's a lot of stuff, it's okay because it is today. Our goal at a special needs plan with our families is to turn this information fire hose of special needs planning, this thinking about this future and independence and how that can be overwhelming. Our goal is to turn that fire hose, that stream of water, eventually into a manageable garden hose of a trickle because we believe that if you can start to break down the different pieces of this planning and have and know the steps going forward, it's much easier to take it in as a trickle and then to be able to make decisions and allow what you want to have happen and that vision that you have in your head to actually take place. And so that's our goal as we start to get into our time together today. Jen already did a great job of introducing me. So this is me on a screen. So we're going to skip over this slide as well. One thing that I always like to start with is let's define what special needs planning is. And I always use the vision or the image of a target. And I love to start with the center or the bullseye of the target. And I call that our why. As we've been working with families over the last couple decades, the why has become clearer and clearer to us of this type of planning. And we call it life, which is lasting independence for everyone. And we call it that because this type of planning seems to be the most family-oriented planning that exists. Because we need to make sure that everybody that's going to be involved in your loved one's life has some sort of or has a sense of independence. So if we have parents on this lunch and learn today, then we know you need to understand what your vision of independence looks like to make sure that you have independence from, physical independence, health independence, financial independence, right? We know what that plan looks like so that you are going to be independent. Because if you're not independent, it's going to be very hard to build an independence plan or a vision of that future support for your loved one because they are dependent on you to make sure that you're in a good position so that they will eventually also be in a good position. So we need to understand and link your plan with your loved one with a diagnosis plan, right? And make sure their independence, we understand what that vision looks like. And then we need to understand what does independence really look like for those other folks that what we like to call may be a part of your loved one's support team over their lifetime. So it could be adult siblings, it could be nieces and nephews. It just depends on what your family structure looks like. And the reason that this is important is we receive so many phone calls from siblings who call us on the phone, and I'll answer the phone, and they'll say, "Hey Ryan, I just need to understand what our family needs to do. My mom has passed away. My dad is 80, and my brother or sister lives with my dad, and I have no idea what the plan is. I don't know what my role or responsibility needs to be, and I'm starting to freak out a little bit because I just don't know." We want to make sure that families and siblings or nieces and nephews can avoid that situation. So, I'll share with you. I'm working with a sibling organization now. It's a national organization for siblings, and working with them on some educational resource materials to send out to families because as they've told me, and it's all adult siblings in this organization, they said our number one concern is what is the future plan? That's their number one concern. So they don't have, many of them don't have this sense of independence. And even other folks, we had a 23-year-old call us just the other day, and it's a 23-year-old sibling. It's a sister and a brother. So she's the sister, and her brother has a intellectual and developmental disability. And unfortunately, both her parents have passed away in the last 9 months. And she found us, she was referred to us, and she called us and she said, I have no idea what to do. I'm struggling with one, the emotion of losing my parents at a young age. I know and I want to be able to take care of my brother, but I just don't know what I'm supposed to do or how to do it. So those are the things that we want to avoid, right? We want to get ahead of that. And we want to create this vision of why. We want to create this lasting independence for everyone. And I'm going to show you on the next screen how we're going to do that, right? How do we do that? Because that's the next ring of the circle, right? That's the how. How is creating what I like to call this multi-generational story, right? We want to create a story that lasts over 2 generations, right? 2 lifetimes. That's why we call this planning for 2 lifetimes. So I'm going to educate you on in terms of when we think about the story, what do we think about? And so that's what we're going to start to create as we go forward, because then we're going to talk about the third ring of this target, which is the what. And those are those specific action steps that your family needs to understand what they are and what are the pieces that are really going to be important to make sure that that why, that bullseye, that list, that lasting independence is always secure. So how do we frame this story, right? How do we frame this double generation, right? This dual generation story. And I always reference the book 7 Habits to Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Great book, by the way, for several different reasons. But habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. And that's what I think about when we think about framing your story. So we put it on a timeline and we think about, okay, let's start with today. And then we're going to go all the way to the end of your child's life because that's how long this story needs to be. And that's really unique, everybody, because only about 15% of the population has to plan this way. The other 85% doesn't have to. They're not concerned about going all the way to the end of their child's life. Where are they concerned? They're concerned about getting to the end of their life. And then, hey, right? That other 85%, if they die with $1 and they have 3 kids, great. Their favorite one gets 34 cents. But that's different for our families. It's just not the same, which means that the planning has to be different. The tools have to be different. What we think about has to be different because we're not trying to last it just to the end of a parent's life. We need to last it for the end of your child's life, which is 2 lifetimes. So we need to figure out, what does that look like? What are the pieces of this planning? And certainly as we continue to move backwards, the parent's retirement is very important. Some of you might be in this stage already. Some of you might not even be close to this stage, and that's okay. What I want to do with this timeline is give you an idea of what's going to be on it as you are creating this story, this plan, this vision. Because retirement for our families is twofold. Certainly it's financial, right? We need to make sure there's enough resources for your lifetime and your child's lifetime, right? To make sure they have the support needs, they have the resources there to provide support for them. But it's not only that, it's also, when do you retire as the primary caregiver? We know the statistics still tell us that 75% of adults with intellectual developmental disabilities live with their parents, with their aging parents. So we know that to be the case. So what we want to do is make sure that if that is the case, we need to talk about when do parents retire, so to speak, as that primary care person, as that primary caregiver. And how do we do that? That's why I love doing these events, especially with organizations like Monarch, because Monarch's one of those organizations that can help families, that can help parents kind of retire as that primary support person, right? Figure out what is the next step in housing options, in support, daily supports, right? What does that look like? And Monarch's a great organization that can help families start to think about that. Because a lot of times we wait too long. We wait until parents' health fades. And then the family's got to come in and not only figure out, okay, where does mom and dad go because they need help on a daily basis, but now where does brother or sister go to? So what I always say is, hey, we need to start thinking about that ahead of time. While everybody's still healthy, what does that next situation look like? So that's a part of retirement that again, 85% of the rest of the population never even considers. They don't even consider it. But we have to, right? Another unique part of the story that you're creating. And then your retirement decision, especially when it comes to your government benefits as a parent. If your loved one with a diagnosis is receiving government benefits like SSI, right? Supplemental security income, that monthly income stream, if they're receiving that, then we need to understand, and especially if they received it before the age of 22, and they're considered what's called a disabled adult child in the eyes of Social Security, then when you take your Social Security retirement income, your retirement benefit that you've earned over your life and paid into over your lifetime, when you take that at whatever age you decide to, you need to understand that that's going to impact your son or daughter's benefits because they very well will be eligible to receive benefits based upon your Social Security choice. So that means when you're choosing your Social Security, you're not only looking at your own plan for the rest of your life, but you're also looking at, okay, how does this change my child's income stream for the rest of their life? So again, what I want you to understand as we go through this part of the plan, this part of the um, educational event today is your plan and your child's plan are linked together. Decisions you make in your plan will impact your child's plan. It's just the way it is, right? You can't separate those two. You have to do this planning together. Because it also means if retirement is out in the distance for you, we need to understand what's your plan for that. What's your plan for your child's future as well? Because that's going to dictate what you do today, right? How you spend your money, how you save your money, what tools you use to build assets. And one of those reasons is, again, government benefits for your loved one, for you, taxes for you and for your loved one are all part of that conversation. Another big element in families' lives is college. And some of you are beyond this stage, some of you might be right in it, and some of you might be listening and you're before it. But college can be very important to a family. It could be important for all your children to go to college. And how are you going to provide that funding stream? And are you going to? And it could be for your loved one with a diagnosis. There are over 400 what are called think colleges in the United States. And those are programs specifically designed for individuals with a diagnosis. And they can be different types of programs. They could be 2-year programs, 3-year programs. They could be 4-year programs, and they all could have a different focus, right? Some 4-year programs will focus on a college degree. Some programs are going to focus on independent living skills. Some are going to focus on employment skills. So it just depends. So again, that could be in your child's story. I don't know, but you want to think about it. Transition is another time frame that's very important. When obviously there are many transitions in life. this transition we're thinking about specifically for your loved one with a diagnosis, I think of it starting at 17 through age 24. We're kind of getting to the end of school system, being in the school system into adult life. And that's a big transition for so many families because a lot of times we need to figure out what are we going to do in adult life? Because at least we've been in the school system during the day for 21, 22 years. Now there's no school system there anymore. So what do we do during the day? What opportunities are there? What does that mean? Are those private pay? Do government benefits come in to help fund that? What are we looking at, right? What does that mean? The other reason transition is so important, if you're before that stage, and for some of you who are beyond that stage, this will be a little bit of a repeat. Um, but at age 18, your loved one is a legal adult in the eyes of the law. So that means you have to decide, are you going to stay in that parental decision-making role? Which means, are you going to become their guardian? Right? Are you going to be in that decision-making role for healthcare needs, for educational needs, for whatever kind of comes up in their life? You're the legal decision maker. They're not, right? Does your child need that kind of protection and support? So that's a decision that has to be made at 18. And we have very specific questions, and I'll share one of them with you if you're at that stage and you struggle with this decision. Ask yourself, what is the developmental age of my loved one? And if they're 18 years old chronologically, but 12 years old developmentally, you have to ask yourself the next question of, would I let my 12-year-old be in their IEP meeting by themselves? Would I let my 12-year-old make their own healthcare decision by themselves? Would I let my 12-year-old open up a credit card by themselves? So sometimes those two questions will help you make that guardianship decision. The other piece at age 18 is they can qualify for certain government benefits from a federal level. They can qualify for SSI, that income stream that I mentioned a little earlier. They can qualify for Medicaid from a healthcare standpoint. And that Medicaid qualification, that Medicaid number can open them up for other services. Especially, I know, obviously Monarch uh, now has Rhode Island, which is awesome. I didn't know that, so Jen, thank you for sharing that. But obviously, North Carolina is where Monarch has been since I think Jen said 1958, which is awesome. I feel like a special needs plan is just a baby compared to you guys, which is good. There's different services that might be available when your child has a Medicaid number, right? There's what's called 1915I services that could help in maybe helping with some of those adult life items. There's something called NC HIP that comes into play. It's a health insurance partnership program that could be available once your loved one has a Medicaid number. So age 18 is important because if your child can qualify for SSI and Medicaid at that time, then there could be some other benefits that also open up to them. And so that's why it's so important to understand, hey, as we look at this lifetime story, you need to understand, hey, these are just some of the pieces. What are the other pieces that are going to be important for your family and your loved one? And we need to chart that out. We need to chart them out because one of the important elements of it is we need to connect and place a financial backdrop to this story, right? How is it going to be funded? What are we going to use? And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through today. But we need to understand what does that financial backdrop mean for 2 lifetimes of support, right? Making sure you have enough as parents and making sure your loved one has enough. Because again, sometimes this can happen to parents too, right? Your health fades before you pass away. We need to plan for that. And unfortunately, these things happen. And sometimes they happen earlier than we expect, like that young lady that just came to us who's 23 years old. She certainly did not expect both her parents to pass away so early. So we need to talk about it because what I'd rather have done is I'd rather have talked to those parents years ago to have a game plan for if that event did happen, what do we do? And so that that could have been introduced to their daughter. So their daughter could have known already what the plan is, who to go to for help and what to do, instead of now she's in chaos and confusion. So we just want to talk about it and make sure that it is part of your story so that then you can communicate it and make plans to ensure that what you want to have happen actually will. So let's think about once we understand, hey, this is our why, right? We got to create lasting independence for our entire family and our entire situation and everybody that's involved with your loved one. We need to figure out what our story looks like so we can understand, hey, what are the pieces that we need as our family? What are the pieces that our loved one needs for their lifetime support? So that we can bring the what's together, right? We can bring the pieces of it together. And those pieces are going to surround your family. And we're going to fill this chart in for us or this PowerPoint slide in for us. So it always starts with the story that we just said. We need to make sure, okay, we need to understand the financial piece. Understand what does your financial life look like today? And where does everything sit? So we need to understand all these areas. We need to understand parents' income and expenses. We need to understand where your assets are located. Where are you saving money? And why are you saving money there? What do your assets look like? What do your debts look like? What type of insurance do you have? For some of you, your loved one might be working as well, or they're receiving SSI, or they're receiving Social Security based upon your retirement already. If so, super. What do we need there? We need to understand their cash flow. We need to understand what does their income look like? What expenses are allocated towards them that they're paying for already? Right? Are they saving money? If so, where are they saving it? Because that's really important. And we're going to talk about that today. There's really only two places that your loved one should have assets in order to continue to qualify for these government benefit programs that can be so important. And we're going to talk about both those items today in kind of a brief overview. But we need to understand where your assets sit because where your assets sit will eventually be transferred to your loved one. And based on where your assets sit, that will impact how much of those assets your child receives. And that's because of taxation. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. So government benefits, right? Another pillar of this planning. Government benefits can be so important. We've already mentioned a number of them. We mentioned SSI, that monthly income stream. We mentioned Medicaid. We mentioned 1915I services. We mentioned NC HIP. There's also waiver plans. North Carolina, right? The big one that we talk about is innovations waiver. There's also a TBI waiver. As Jen said, Monarch serves folks with traumatic brain injury. So there are different waiver programs we have to understand and know about so that your loved one can access them as much as possible, because that can be a resource stream for them, a funding stream for them to help them receive the supports that they need for their lifetime. And with that being said, we need to keep in mind that red number in the bottom left side of the screen, $2,000. That's right, $2,000. That's the asset resource limit. That's the amount of money your child can have in their name and still qualify for those government benefits I just mentioned. And I know Jen and Monarch can attest to this. Those benefits, right? Those waivers, the SSI, the Medicaid, depending on how long your child lives, it can literally, everybody, be worth millions of dollars worth of resources and support. And that is not hyperbole. Everybody, I promise you, it's not hyperbole. So we don't want to lose that because all of a sudden you put $2,500 in the wrong type of account for your loved one and they lose access to those kind of funding streams. So we need to understand, okay, well, Ryan, where do we put the money? There's two places we're going to talk about today. You saw one of them when I brought up the financial side. It's ABLE accounts and special needs trusts. Those are the two places. That's it. that your loved one can have money and still qualify for these government benefit programs. And so we're going to talk through that as we go through today. Because again, one of the other important pieces is if you're still working, understanding what your employee benefits look like. If you own a business, understanding what that business looks like. And that's really important because if you own a business, you can do things through your business to help this support structure that other people that don't own a business can't. So that's really important to understand what your employee benefits are if you're still working as a parent, but also possibly your child may be working and may be receiving some employee benefits. And that's really important as well to make sure they can continue keeping their government benefits as much as possible. Legal, also very important, right? We need to understand what legal pieces do you need? And there's certainly a number of them on this list. If you don't have them yet, don't fret, right? We want to make sure you get them as you go forward. But certainly, just as a quick description, right? A will is really simple. It just does three things. It tells the court system who do you want to administer your wishes, who's going to take care of your people, and where does your stuff go? And so the stuff, right? The resources, the money, the assets that you have that you want to go to your loved one with a diagnosis is you want to go to a special needs trust. And a special needs trust has several different types of goals, right? One of the major goals is, again, it ensures the security and qualification for government benefits, right? That's one of the major reasons that you have it. Because special needs trust has very, very specific language in it where the government doesn't see, so to speak, right? I'll use see with air quotes, see the money inside of that specific type of trust, right? It has to be that it's a very specific type of trust with very specific language in it. The money has to be in that specific type of trust, and the government doesn't see it as your child's asset, right? Your loved one is the beneficiary of the trust, but they don't own it. So therefore, the assets in there do not count towards that $2,000 asset resource limit. So that's really important as we think about what are these trusts going to do? What can they pay for? And they can pay for a lot of things, everybody. They can't necessarily pay for rent and grocery store items, right? I call it eats and sheets. Can't really do that from there, but there is a way now, and we're going to talk about that as we go forward with what's called ABLE accounts, that you can actually transfer money from a special needs trust into an ABLE account. And guess what you can pay for out of ABLE accounts? You can pay for rent, you can pay for utilities, you can pay for grocery store. So it's becoming a universe and a system that all again works together. We just have to know how to use all the pieces effectively as a unit, as a system. So I'm going to talk really briefly about special needs trust because I know I talk about this stuff and I get excited about it. So I'd like to give you details on it, but I know we're coming up on 10 or 15 minutes until we have to get to questions. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. There are two different ways to set up special needs trusts. You can set it up testamentary, which lives inside of a will or lives inside of, let's say, a revocable trust. And again, what testamentary means is it doesn't exist yet. It's not alive. It requires if that special needs trust lives inside of a will or inside of another trust, it requires you to die for that trust to come into existence. So it's limited, right? I was talking to grandparents just this morning at 9 o'clock, and they said, "Well, Ryan, we have a special needs trust for our granddaughter." I said, "Well, how is it? What do you mean by that?" And they said, "Well, we have a revocable trust that owns our assets, and inside that revocable trust, when we die, there's language in there that opens up a special needs trust for our granddaughter." Um, and I said, "Well, that's good." I said, "But you have to die for you to use that. And you just told me that you wanted to gift money to your granddaughter. Well, you can't do that then, because that special needs trust doesn't exist. You have to have an inter vivos trust. That just means it's alive today. It's a standalone trust. If you have these documents done, you would know if you have a standalone special needs trust, if it's a separate document from your will, from any other trust, from your healthcare power of attorney, from any other document that you have, you would know if it's inter vivos or standalone, if it's a separate document. And the title of that document would be something like your child's name, supplemental needs trust, with a date, dated, June 14th, 2025, right? So you would know if you had that. We prefer that one um, because it's more flexible, meaning that an account can be opened today, right? And please remember, trust can own anything you and I can own. So it can own checking accounts, savings accounts, investment accounts, real estate, you know, I guess it could own Bitcoin, right? If you had any of that. So it can really own anything you and I can own. It can own life insurance, right? It can own anything you and I can own, but it has to be alive to do that. And alive means it needs to be a separate document and it needs its own tax ID number. It needs its own social security number, right? It can't be under yours, shouldn't be under your child's, right? It has to be separate. And so we like that one because it's more flexible, meaning you can open an account. And you can open it with $50 or $100, but it's just there. So that if parents pass away, the next folks who are gonna grab that baton and keep running with it knows that account already exists. They don't have to go figure out how to set it up. It's already done. So it's one less thing for the support team to try to do later on in life. It also allows, let's say, grandparents or a generation above, maybe you, to provide financial resources if they wanted to, without you having to die as the parent. So you can fund special needs trusts in several ways, right? You can fund it with lump sums, right? If you want to put 5,000 in it, 10,000, 100,000, 5 million, whatever it is, you can do that. You can fund it with real estate. You can fund it with all sorts of different things. Real estate, you got to be careful, but you can do it. You just have to do it in a certain way. Periodic payments, right? You could set up a checking account or a savings account and put $50 a month, $100 a month in it. You just, as the parent, want to be careful because as a parent, you have to remember that once you put money in this trust, it can only be used for one purpose, and that's for the benefit of your loved one with a diagnosis. So if as a parent you put money in here and all of a sudden the roof leaks and you need to replace the roof, you can't take money out of the special needs trust to fix the roof. So you just want to make sure you understand how to do that and when to fund it. For so many of our parents, they still wait till later in life or when they pass away to fund the majority of the trust. So some families use life insurance, some families will use equity from the sale of a primary home. Certainly several ways to do it. It just depends on your family. One of the jobs that you need to make sure you understand is the trustee. The trustee is the decision maker of the trust, right? The trustee is the person who makes decisions about, am I opening a checking account or a savings account or an investment account? And then they're the ones deciding, they're the final decision maker on what to invest in. They're the decision maker on when to do taxes. They're the decision maker on how to make distributions. So again, they have that responsibility. So they need to understand what your child needs. So they make those distributions. Need to understand how to manage resources inside of a special needs trust, which means they need to understand the taxation of a special needs trust, which I got news is different from other trusts. Surprise, surprise, right? And then they need to understand the distribution rules of a special needs trust, which again are different from other trusts. So when I'm talking to families, I say, listen, those are the four responsibilities of the trustee. What are you thinking? And they think, okay, well, maybe my son or daughter's an attorney or my brother's an accountant. And I say, great. Or, my uncle is the CFO of a company. I say, great. I ask two questions, which are the questions you should ask. Have they ever managed a special needs trust before? So far in 20 years of doing this, 100% of the time it's been zero. No, everybody said no. Second question is, do they know where the rules are located? Again, over the last 20 years, 100% of the time, that answer has been no. So I say, well, how successful do you think they're going to be? And if they're not successful, what does that mean? That means there's distributions that don't qualify as distributions that therefore could put the government benefits in jeopardy. That is not allowable. We cannot put those government benefits in jeopardy. So what I say is, okay, make the family member a trustee, but give them help. Don't leave them on an island, right? Give them a trustee advisor, give them an administrative trustee, give them a co-trustee, right? And that's certainly some things that we do for families as we're creating these plans for them. But I do want to touch on this, the other account that that your loved one can have. And your loved one can have an ABLE account. So there are two places your loved one can have money above and beyond the $2,000 asset limit, special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. There are advantages and disadvantages to ABLE accounts. Um, so the benefits of them are on the left side of the screen, right? Which is they can have more than $2,000 in it, right? And still qualify for government benefits. Great. That means your loved one can have an account with more than $2,000 in it, and they can own this account when they're an adult. So it can actually be their account. They can be the owner. Remember, they cannot be the owner of the special needs trust. They cannot be the trustee of the special needs trust. They can only be the beneficiary. ABLE account is different. ABLE account, they can be the owner, and it still allows them to build savings. So if they're working or if they are not spending all their SSI or Social Security money, let them build it up in the ABLE, right? They can do that. They can do that, which is fantastic. But there are disadvantages. There's an annual funding limit. So families or the individual with the ABLE account, their contribution amount from an annual standpoint from January 1 through December 31st is $19,000. There's also a maximum account value before SSI is suspended. So again, the maximum account value is $100,000. So if that ABLE account gets above $100,000 and your loved one's on SSI, specifically SSI, supplemental security income, the next month's check gets suspended. So they don't get it. They get zero. So we need to be careful. There's also a payback to Medicaid in all states and federal, except for 6 states. And guess what? North Carolina is one of those 6 states as of this June. Brand new information, everybody. Brand new. So if you're in North Carolina and you use the North Carolina ABLE account, then the state of North Carolina will not claw back money that they provided your loved one from their Medicaid services. Now, the federal government can still go grab money and say, hey, federal government gave this amount of money to your loved one. They can still claw back that money at the end of your loved one's life, if they choose to. So those are the disadvantages. So from this event, so from our time together today, here's what I want you to do with ABLE accounts and special needs trusts. ABLE accounts are for smaller sums of money. Special needs trusts are for larger sums of money. Because you can have $5 million in a special needs trust, and there's no impact to any of your loved one's government benefits, right? Again, as long as that trust is written correctly and managed properly, there's no impact to the government benefits. So again, larger sums in the special needs trust, smaller sums in the ABLE account. If you have unique assets, they have to go in the special needs trust as well, because ABLE accounts don't allow you to buy individual stocks or own real estate inside an ABLE account. You have to just use what the ABLE account offers as investments. And so again, we can talk about ABLE and special needs trusts in another lunch and learn if everybody wants to. We have a specific section just on those two tools because they're pretty popular to learn about. But for today, ABLE accounts, smaller amounts of money, special needs trust, larger sums of money. Tax strategy is going to be important, everybody. This is where asset location is key, meaning where do you have your money sitting and which assets are you going to use to fund your loved one's future support into that special needs trust? Because I have news for you. If you fund the special needs trust with certain assets, it's very likely the trust will have to pay 40 to 50% of that money out in income tax over time through the trust tax rates. You don't have to do that, right? So it depends on what your financial situation which looks like. It depends on where you're saving money to determine which assets go into your loved one's special needs trust. Because there's no reason to give away money when you don't have to, because you can save money in certain places that could go into the trust and be managed inside the trust with very, very low taxes or maybe even 0% taxes. And that's a huge difference, everybody. There's no reason, if you're doing this planning, that you are planning for the US government instead of for your loved one's future support. So tax strategy is critical in this planning. I know we're not talking a lot about taxes today because that, one, you might fall asleep, but two, that's a whole session on its own. But just know where your assets sit is very, very important, and which asset you leave to the special needs trust is critical in terms of how much of that money will actually be left for your loved one's support after taxes. Communication, everybody, is key, right? Once you have all these pieces put together, we want to make sure they're coordinated. We have to link them together. They can't just be floating out on their own. We have to link them together. And so part of that linking is making sure they're coordinated. The financial understands the legal, government benefits, understands tax strategy. We're working your business into the plan to make sure it's maximized the effectiveness of the plan. And then we communicate it, right? We communicate it to those people who are involved in your loved one's life, right? It could be siblings, it could be aunts, it could be uncles, it could be nieces or nephews. We want everybody to understand, hey, what goes on in your loved one's life on a daily basis, right? That's called a life journal. That's our version of a letter of intent, right? That's all your loved one's medical information. What do they do on a day-to-day basis? Who handles their benefits? What is Monarch doing for your loved one? What government benefits do they have? All those different pieces should be in that one document. And then a family care notice to educate extended family on, if they want to leave resources, what is the best way to do it, and how do they do it without jeopardizing future benefits? So those are huge communication pieces that need to be done, because we want to ensure that, if people want to help, they do so in the right way and they know what day-to-day life looks like. Again, and just so everybody knows, we are creating these communication tools now on a software platform that should be available in September, actually, or mid-September, as an app and a web-based platform that you can coordinate the support team together. You can coordinate what life looks like together, and you have all the legal documents there, where your financial dollars are, which assets are going to fund the trust, everything in there in one easy place, to make sure that this structure is linked, is coordinated, and is communicated together. This is what we love right here. We love educating, action, and support. So we love doing these events, and yet we also love action, right? You have to do something with it. So what I always say today is, continue to learn about this. Go to our website. We have a resource page on our website that just continues to help you learn about all these different things. I'm going to put a survey in the chat, a link to a survey. I ask that you go to that. Let us know what you liked about today, what you wish you learned more about. And we love to support, right? That's what we do for our families. We support our families over 2 generations, right? This is that story timeline in a little bit better form. And I'm sure you can find yourself on one of the push pins on the map. But that's what we do. We come alongside families and make sure that the plan is going to work. And then we make sure it's managed appropriately, and working with the family and the support team and everybody involved in all the areas that we've gone through, going forward. So I'm going to come back for question and answers. I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. I know we have a few minutes left. Sorry, I know I can go overboard there. I did put that evaluation form in the chat. If you could click on the link and let us know what you liked or didn't like. But certainly happy to answer any questions.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much, Ryan. I hope everyone found that as beneficial as I did. He mentioned a survey. So if you want to scan this QR code, you can get to the survey. It should just take you about 60 seconds, and it's just an evaluation of the presentation, and it helps give us feedback moving into future presentations. So I'll leave that up for a moment so you can scan. And as in terms of questions, what we're going to do, we have a few minutes left here. You can put your question in the chat or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. So we'll just jump right back into questions. So I see Stuart has his hand raised.
Yeah, so that was a very good presentation. Thank you for that. It was very informative. Where we're at in the process is I and my wife are both retired. We have an adult son who's going to be 40, who happens to live in a group home. Where we're at in the process is setting up that special needs trust. The challenge that we're trying to put some clarity to is his brother lives in California. We've relocated from California to Maryland to Texas and now North Carolina as a part of my job. And there's no reciprocity between states. And so the only benefit that he has is he does get formal social security as a part of a disabled adult, as part of my social security benefit, and dual eligible Medicare, Medicaid. So that's a huge plus. The question I have is, and I think you answered it, that the special needs trust can be managed independently. That's where we're leaning towards, is going towards, is having an independent trustee to manage the special needs trust. Can his brother provide input to the trustee for needs that may arise over the course of time after our passing? And then the other aspect is looking to fund that special needs trust upon our passing.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a recommended, suggested funding level for a special needs trust for a person? Because, and again, you really clarified, age-wise, he's going to be 40, but intellectually, he may be, to use your term, 12. And so, I don't know what his life expectancy is going to be. It's hard to read those tea leaves, but I guess my question is, to what level does one need to fund that? I mean, if one puts, I'm just going to throw a number out, $250,000 into a special needs trust, that, is going to accrue interest over time, his expenses aren't going to be that much. So I guess from your expertise area, is there a value that you folks recommend? And then part B of the question is, how does one coordinate with Monarch, because he is serviced by Monarch now, and Partners is his MCO? Who would you recommend as the best resource for facilitating all of those conversations? That was long-winded. Thank you.
No, Stuart, that's awesome. I appreciate that. So one, the trustee side is yes, there are what they call them, corporate trustees, that can be the trustee of the special needs trust. So that is certainly an option. Depending on, and then this leads into your other piece, is depending on the amount of money that will be funding the trust would determine what trustee might be an option, because different trustees have different minimums to be able to manage that trust. But you could have your son involved. Typically, when we look at that and we start thinking about that for families, we consider what's called a trust protector.
Hmm.
And that could be your son in California. He could be the trust protector of the trust. And then you have a corporate trustee as the trustee. What that trust protector does is they have the ability to hire and fire that trustee. Now it's not an adversarial role. They can and usually do work together, but at least that corporate trustee knows that there's a family member involved, not doing the day-to-day stuff, but maybe meeting with the trustee, every quarter or every half a year, to make sure that things are on track, to make sure that your other son is receiving funds that he needs, above and beyond what the benefits are providing and what Monarch's providing. And that so your son wouldn't have the main responsibility of trustee and all those other pieces that are a part of it. But he would be involved, and he would kind of be the final decision maker on, hey, is this trustee doing a good job, or do I need to change it to somebody else? So it keeps everybody on their toes that way. So I like that. Um, and then the funding side is very there's not really a general number. It's very family specific. So that's part of what we do with our families is figure out that number based upon what your son needs right now, what's being covered by government benefits today, um, what might be in jeopardy with government benefits. That's one of the risks we always talk about is government benefit risk, reimbursement rates. What does that mean? Obviously, we see some of that happening right now. We saw, the Medicaid cuts at the federal level and what that's done to North Carolina right now, right? The legislator just came back and looked at some reimbursement rates cuts for providers that are providing different levels of services supposed to go in place October 1st. So we're starting to see that risk starting to rear its head because our government's in $37 trillion worth of debt. And so, that comes into play when we're thinking about this plan and how much your son might need in the trust. Depending on the family situation, we probably lean more on the side of, hey, well, if you overfund the special needs trust, that's okay because the trust has a contingent beneficiary, that could be your son in California. So he would get what's left over anyway. So again, that's a tough one to give you an answer on in terms of general, but we do go through a very specific process to make sure we understand what the expenses are, what all the government benefits are, uh, how they're getting paid. Like you said, working with Monarch, who's managing them, um, to make sure there's enough in that trust.
Thank you for that question, Stuart. Ryan, do you have a few minutes? We have 2 to 3 questions in the chat. Do you have a few minutes or? Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
absolutely. Yeah, I see one. The Kimberly asked if there's a pamphlet. We do. We have a, guide booklet on special needs planning that you know you're where we can send you. You can download from the website. We have physical copies we can mail you, or you can download it from the website as well. So we definitely have that also.
Perfect. The next one says, does a special needs trust require a disability decision by the government? If so, do I have alternatives for myself because I am not disabled on paper? I haven't applied yet.
All right. And then one thing also with just going back to Stuart or anybody else that has these questions that might need more specific answers, right? Go to that just like Jen said, go to that evaluation form. And if you do have more questions, you can actually put your questions there and then just put your contact information and we can reach out to you for a quick phone call to kind of answer those questions. So Stuart, if I didn't answer all your questions or you need some more details, just fill that out, let us know, and one of our folks can give you a buzz and continue that conversation. And that's for anybody else too. So does a special needs trust require a disability decision by the government? It does not. You can still have a special needs trust. You can still open it up. um, and still have the ability to use that. If you are not receiving government benefits like Medicaid, like SSI, like waiver programs that require that $2,000 asset limit in your name, and you have money in the trust, that's okay. Then you can just manage it like a regular trust, I call it, and not worry about the distribution rules surrounding the government benefit side. You could just use the money in there for really whatever you want to use it for, and just make sure that you are using it as the trust states, but not worried about the rules for continued government benefit qualification. Um, so you can open one. Um, and if you do receive a disability diagnosis later, then that would be fine. Now that's a difference with an ABLE account. An ABLE account, you have to have a qualifying disability to be able to open an ABLE account.
Thank you. And I do want to mention, Ryan mentioned the innovations waiver in the 1915I. We actually held lunch and learn sessions on those. So following this event, what we'll do is we'll add the recording of this presentation to our lunch and learn website. But also on that website, you can find recordings to the 1915I and the innovations waiver presentation if you're interested in more information on those. So we'll
Yep.
jump into our last question. Our adult child has a form of muscular dystrophy. She is living with us at this time. We have a living trust, but did not know about the special needs trust. Terry, did you have, or Georgia, Terry, did you have a question within that?
So what I would say, George, is I know there's no question there. I would just consider it depends on um, what level of support your adult child needs right now, and maybe what level of support you think she will need going forward. And if we're going to need some government benefits to help with that support, which again, many times we do, even if it's just Medicaid from a long-term care support standpoint, meaning helping with activities of daily living, then a special needs trust would also work in that situation as well. Where if your child does need support later, even if she's okay now, but she does need support later, special needs trust might work. So, for example, um, we have a family that we work with, and their adult child was diagnosed with Parkinson's pretty early on in life, right, in their 30s, with Parkinson's disease. So we have created a special needs trust, because as we watch Parkinson's, right, and if anybody knows the progression of Parkinson's, it gets to a point where an individual really needs 24-hour support, right? They're not able to dress themselves. They're not able to feed themselves. They're not able to cook. They need help using the restroom. And so, that costs money to be able to do that. And so if dad wanted to make sure that he could put money in a special needs trust for her to support her, but that she could also qualify for some of these government benefits that might help with some of those resources and some of those support needs, or the resources for those support needs. So I would say that it could make sense to do. Again, happy to chat more about your specific situation. Fill out the evaluation form and your contact info, and we can do that to make sure I'm not giving you advice that wouldn't make sense to you or for you.
Well, I think that wraps up our time today. I mentioned that Lunch and Learn webpage. You can go to that page to submit topic suggestions, or we've made it easy for you today. If you scan this QR code, it'll take you to a simple form that just asks you, what do you want to hear about in these sessions? Because the Lunch and Learn series that we've started is relatively new, but we've seen it's been beneficial for the people we support and their caregivers, and we'd like to continue doing them. But we want to hear from you what you want to learn about. So just scan that QR code if you have a suggestion, and thank you so much for attending today.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jen, for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be here. So
Perfect. We appreciate you sharing. Thanks so much.
you
Bye,
got it.
everyone. Have a good day.